With Halloween fast approaching, let's take a look at some of the creepiest and most haunted places throughout Canada and Alaska. Hit those lights, sit back, and enjoy. Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel in Alberta. The Banff Springs Hotel is a luxury hotel located at the merging of the Bow and Spray River in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. It was built in 1887 and was opened to guests in 1888. Such was its success that it underwent 2 upgrades in the early 1900s and gained the reputation as one of the top 3 mountain getaways in North America. But in 1926, disaster struck when the original wooden building burnt to the ground. It was quickly rebuilt as the much larger structure it is today, and over the years it has welcomed many distinguished guests from all over the world, including royalty, film stars, and government leaders. But it seems that as well as its well-heeled guests, it also has a few unwanted ones, and it's believed the place is now teeming with paranormal activity. Probably the most famous of all the spirits residing there is the bride. Her story dates back to the 1920s, when a young bride, decked out in a wedding gown, was walking down one of the grand marble staircases in the hotel when something scared her. As she recoiled, her heel caught in the hem of her dress and she tumbled down the stairs to her death. Since that fateful day, hotel staff and guests alike have reported seeing a figure floating up and down the stairs, or seeing a woman in a wedding dress dancing alone in the ballroom. Another regular visitor from the spirit world is Sam Macaulay, a Scottish man who was head bellman during the 60s and 70s, and who died in 1975. Sam the Bellman, as his ghost is known as, has been making his presence known at the hotel since his death, and far from scaring people, it turns out he's a very helpful ghost. One incident in particular involved 2 elderly ladies who called reception after they found their key wouldn't work. The bellman on duty was busy with other guests, so did not respond for over 15 minutes, and by the time he went up to help the ladies, it seemed they no longer needed his assistance. They explained that an older bellman with a Scottish accent had helped them and managed to unlock the door. At the time, there was no Scottish employees working at the hotel. Other stories include visitors seeing Sam in his old office that is now a guest room, as well as seeing his apparition and feeling cold spots on the 6th, 7th and 9th floors of the hotel. In addition to these 2 well-known ghosts, there is also the mystery of room 873, a room on the 8th floor that clearly once existed but has long since been bricked up and is no longer in use for guests. The story goes that a family of 3 checked into the room years ago, a father, mother and little girl. One night, the father went berserk and murdered his wife and daughter before taking his own life. After the tragic incident, management at the hotel cleaned up and refurbished the room before putting it back in service. But soon guests started complaining about violent screams waking them up in the middle of the night, and when they turned the lights to see what was going on, they would find bloody handprints on the walls. Apparently it got so bad that the hotel decided to brick up the room in the hope that it would seal in the spirits and the bloody handprints forever. Although representatives of the hotel stay quiet about the room and deny that a murder-suicide ever happened, or that there is a blood-splattered room sealed behind a brick wall. I'd be interested to know if any of you have ever stayed at this hotel. Ottowa Jail Hostel. The Ottowa Jail Hostel in Ottowa, Ontario, is a converted jailhouse that was built in the 1860s. It was the main jail of Ottowa for over a century and was situated next door to the courthouse that was connected by a tunnel. The jail was closed in 1972 and converted into a hostel, although much of the original structure was left intact to allow guests to experience spending a night in jail. As you might expect, the place was far from luxurious during its days as a jail, and despite it being a reformed prison, it's seen its fair share of death and violence, and was known for its inhumane conditions, as up to 150 prisoners, including men, women and children, would be forced to share 60 tiny cells and were routinely tortured. The inmates included murderers, the mentally ill, and those locked up for minor offences, such as being drunk and disorderly. Executions were also carried out at the jail, and the original gallows remains on the property and are intact, fully functional. Many prisoners met their death at the prison, and excavations around the property have revealed numerous unmarked graves. So it's not surprising that Ottowa Jail Hostel is believed to be one of the most haunted buildings in all of Canada. Visitors of the hostel frequently report that the place is full of negative energy, and in the area referred to as the Hole, where solitary confinement prisoners were kept stripped of their clothes, shackled to the wall and kept in virtual darkness, has a particularly ominous and creepy atmosphere. Death row is another area that is said to be haunted by the spirits of those waiting for their lives to end. One in particular is Patrick James Whelan, who was hung on February the 11th, 1869 for the assassination of Thomas Darcy McGee. Staff and guests have reported that Whelan's spirit has appeared at the end of guests' beds, or near his death row cell. He has also been spotted walking towards the area that was once the gallows. The lounge area is another part of the hostel that has a lot of activity, with guests reporting sounds of crying and screaming children. This makes sense, as this was the area where women prisoners with children were kept. There is also said to be more aggressive spirits that lurk in the stairwell, possibly former murderous inmates waiting to push their next victim to their deaths. The hostel is apparently so haunted that it's featured in several ghost hunting TV programs. And as always, if you've ever stayed at the Ottowa Jail Hostel, I'd love to hear your experience. Fort Garry Hotel, Manitoba. The Fort Garry Hotel is a historic hotel in downtown Winnipeg, Manitoba. It was built in 1913 by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway, and similar to Fairmont Banff Springs, it has welcomed many a famous guest over the years, including Queen Elizabeth and Louis Armstrong, and in 1981 was designated as a National Historic Site of Canada. It is also said to be haunted by a distressed lady ghost. The story dates back several years to when a lady staying in room 202 was informed that her husband had been killed in a car accident. She was so overcome by grief that she hung herself in the closet. Now guests and staff have reported all manner of strange happenings in the room. One of the most common things is an apparition of a figure in a cloak floating at the foot of the bed. Others have witnessed blood dripping down the walls. And in 2004, when former Ontario Liberal MP Brenda Chamberlain stayed in room 202, she claimed she was awoken by the sensation of someone getting into bed with her, not once, but twice. It's thought that it's not just the room that this ghost haunts, but also the lounge area where she has been seen crying in the corner, and in the hallway outside room 202, sometimes wearing a ball gown. But it seems she may also have been joined by her husband, as there are reports of a male ghost as well, and this was confirmed in 1989, when a night employee was clearing the hotel kitchen, when he was going back up the staircase and heard strange sounds coming from the locked dining room. He immediately rushed to get the keys, fearing an intruder, and when he opened the door, he saw a man sat at the table. He ran out to fetch another member of staff, however when they returned, the figure had vanished. Tonkiel Sanatorium in Kamloops. On the outskirts of Kamloops in British Columbia lies what remains of a complex made up of over 40 buildings, including a hospital that once accommodated the sick and disabled. The once thriving community was a beautiful and tranquil setting, initially designed to provide a sanatorium for those suffering from TB. The area included several homes, a farm, and a fire department. The hospital there closed in 1958 when tuberculosis had become less of a threat, after a cure was discovered in 1957. It was then refurbished and reopened the following year as a mental institute before finally closing for good in 1983. Today the hospital and some of the surrounding buildings are in a state of disrepair and are now thought to be inhabited by the ghosts of the former patients and staff. One of the most haunted areas is in the tunnels beneath what was once the sunken garden. It's thought these tunnels were used to move food and laundry as well as transport dead bodies. It's believed that the staff thought it was a better way of removing them from the main building, so as not to upset the other patients. But I guess no one thought it might upset the dead, as those who have gained access to the tunnels claim they have been pushed by unseen forces, and have heard muffled moans echoing down the tunnels. It's also said that the bodies of the poor and unclaimed were dumped into a mass unmarked grave near the site, and light orbs have been spotted in this area. In the main building, apparitions and dark figures have been seen in the windows, and a strange twisting mist has been captured in photographs, although is never visible to the naked eye. In the paediatric wing of the former hospital, crying children have been heard, and a weeping mother's cries echo down the corridors as she mourns her dead child. The basement is supposedly haunted by an electrician who lost his life down there and whose spirit has been seen wandering around the place. There are also rumours that a nurse was murdered by a patient and she now wanders the grounds at night scaring trespassers. In fact, it's said the whole area has an eerie feeling of sadness and oppression that possibly reflects the pain and suffering of the patients, who lived, and for some, spent their final days there. The Jessie Lee Home for Children in Alaska. The abandoned Jessie Lee Home for Children in Seward, Alaska, was a former home for displaced children. It was run by the United Methodist Church from 1926 until 1964, when one of the worst earthquakes seen in Alaska at the time shook the building and toppled some of the walls of the dormitories, sadly resulting in the deaths of more than a dozen children. With much of the school damaged, the Alaskan government decided to move the school to a new building in Anchorage, where it remains open to this day. But the old buildings were never demolished, and today remains of it serve as an eerie reminder of the lives tragically lost there. Those who have visited the property over the years are convinced the place is haunted, possibly by the ghosts of the children who used to live there. And there are many reports of numerous strange phenomena in and around the old building, as well as an overwhelming sense of sadness. One of the most common anomalies is the sound of giggling from inside the building. There are also frequent reports of the sounds of balls bouncing and skipping ropes lashing against the paving outside the former school. There is also the presence of invisible children racing past, brushing against people as they pass, leading some to believe the spirits are children engaging in a game of tag. However, although this may be disturbing to the unsuspecting visitor, there has never been anything malicious about the ghosts who supposedly haunt the old school, and it seems that the lingering spirits are all happy and filled with joy from their past life. And perhaps they just linger to recapture their former lives that was so cruelly cut short. Despite the intense paranormal activity radiating from the building, there are many that are brave enough to venture near the area after dark. I'd love to know if you ever would, or if you have. So that's the most haunted places in Alaska and Canada. I hope you've enjoyed, and why not head over to our store to show your beliefs in the paranormal with our best-selling I Believe Ghost beanie. Go grab yours now by clicking the link in the description or in the comments section. And I'll see you right back here soon for another creepy video.